Hello and welcome to From Mrs. to Me, a podcast where you'll be inspired by courageous stories of strength and resilience told by women just like you who have been through the upheaval of divorce. This is their journey from Mrs. to Me, finding their true identity and creating a bold, beautiful life. I'm Crissy Freeman and I'm your host, a certified life coach and divorced mother of two. Join me each week as we explore real stories of divorce and what it takes to transform and live in alignment with the real you. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of From Mrs. to Me. I'm Crissy Freeman, divorce empowerment coach and your host. My next guest, Mindi, also known as the Fenyx, is the embodiment of resilience and badassery, which I love. With 3 children at her side and a lifetime of battles behind her, Mindi is a living testament to the unstoppable force of the human spirit. Battling through the grips of toxic marriages with traumatic endings, deep depression, financial ruin, homelessness, and morbid obesity, she emerged stronger, fiercer, and more determined than ever, refusing to be defined by the struggles of her past. She never lost sight of her ultimate goal to create a better life for herself and her children, and to show others what is possible when you refuse to give up on yourself and your dreams. Through her transparent sharing of her own journey and her practical strategies for success, she doesn't just inspire, she empowers. Whether gracing the stage or captivating audiences through a digital realm, Mindi commands attention with her infectious energy and magnetic presence. In a world full of noise, Mindi is a beacon of hope and inspiration, a reminder that no matter how dark the night may be, the dawn always brings new possibilities. So welcome, Mindi, or should I say the Fenyx, to From Mrs. to Me. Thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. Hearing that, I know that that's my bio, and I'm tearing up because it's so surreal to sit in this position and to hear those things. Because there was for sure a time in my life where I would have never dreamed that those things could be said about me and be accurate. That would have just been a complete contrast to the life that I was living. So it just feels amazing to be able to have those things said and know that that was the life that I've lived and created. So thank you for giving me this space to share with you.
Yes, and so powerful. I mean, reading that, I feel inspired, and we haven't even gotten into the meat of the interview. So I love it. That. And I do want to ask you real quick before we jump too far ahead here. Can you tell the audience a little bit about where you got that name, the Fenyx?
Yes, it was actually given to me originally by a student at the school that my daughter attended. So she was in sports and she played volleyball and basketball, and I loved being able to be a part of the team. I was kind of one of the team supporter, the moms that would help with the concession stand. And so I think the first time I remember that name being sort of assigned to me was when I was working at the concession stand, and the student walked up to order something and greeted me and said, "Hey, it's Miss Fenyx." And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he said, "You're the Fenyx. You rose above the ashes," because he had known my story, at least up to that point. And ever since then, it's just repeatedly been given to me or associated with me as, you're the Fenyx, you're the rise above the ashes girl. And so it just kind of stuck as my identity, my brand. And it really is the embodiment of what represents my story and what I have experienced in my own life. And now I get to be that person that is sort of the symbolism of the Fenyx. So I love it.
I love it too. And I wanted you to share it because or the reason behind it, the meaning behind it, because it's not like, one of those coaches or, speakers or performers who, tags themselves, or gives themselves that brand. It's someone gave that to you because of your story. And so you're already inspiring others by just being you and living that out. So I just want to say, that's inspiring in itself, which is why I wanted you to share that.
It's an honor to be perceived that way, It really is. And it's just been something that, even thinking about it, and it's not just me. It's not that, I'm known as the Phoenix, but it is not just me. It's something that's an identity that I feel like so many of us can anchor to, because we've all had our stories, our rise above the ashes stories. And some people are not yet at the rise, and they're sort of still in the ashes, and it's completely fine, because that doesn't mean that the Phoenix isn't your story too. It's like, we are the Phoenix. We are all that person. And it might be still in the making. It might be still being created, but it is something that I feel like all of us can tap into, that energy, into that identity, whether we've actually lived it and we're on the other side of it, and we've risen and we continue to rise, or whether you're still kind of finding yourself surrounded by smoke.
I love that. Yes. And I think so. As you know, this podcast is about that transformation from Mrs. to me. And it really is all about identity and the different sort of costumes, the different identities that we take on throughout our lives. And one of the things I love about your story is that you really are living this authentic life. You're living it out loud. You're not asking, for permission, and, no apologizing. And those are the women that I love to have on the show, because it was a journey, right? It wasn't always that way. And so I would love for you to just take us back just for a minute, just to talk a little bit about sort of the ending of your marriages, and really when you came to the realization that something needed to change for Mindi.
Mm. Whew, that's hard to summarize. I love how you said marriages, because I am someone, I have been married twice, divorced twice. And to give you sort of like the cliff notes, and also a little bit about, what is it that people say when you're kind of ruining the end of something? It's kind of like you're telling the end before, and I can't think of the term that it said, but both of the people that I had married turned out to be criminals. They both ended up in prison. And so that in and of itself was something that you do not want to attach your identity to. And there was a lot of shame in that. There was a lot of condemnation. There was a lot of criticism. There was a lot of people who assigned truths to me that were actually not truths, based on circumstances that I lived or the relationships that I had been in. And it was told to me from the time that I was a young girl that I was stupid, I was good for nothing, I would never amount to anything. I was, if any man was ever stupid enough to marry me, that it would be guaranteed I was divorced within 5 years. And the first time I was married, I got married when I was 18, and I was escaping the life that I had at home, and I was not happy. I was not a happy child. I couldn't wait to leave my home. And I'm not trying to say anything negative about my parents or anything like that. It's, everybody has their journey, and people, I think, generally kind of do the best that they know how. And, I have a lot of love for my parents, but I did not want to be at home. And so the first opportunity I have, as soon as, the stroke of 18, I was out of there, found myself pregnant very soon after that, and had a lot of shame about that, because I was raised in a very conservative, very strict, religious environment. And, that was something that was very shamed, pregnancy before, out of wedlock. And so I got married the day after I found out that I was pregnant, and had my daughter when I was 19 years old. And then fast forward basically 3 years from that, 21 was the first time that I found myself a single parent overnight. The police came to our trailer that we were living in and arrested my then husband. And I found myself a single parent for the first time when I was 21 years old. And at that point, most people are partying and, maybe graduating from college and like just barely getting their feet wet in life. And here I was, someone who had been married for 3 years, a single mom at 21. And then got remarried 2.5 years later, roughly. And, that marriage also ended in a even more traumatic situation. It was, here I was thinking that I had learned a few things, my first rodeo, I learned a few lessons, and, I could make even better choices. And not that I would have ever known, there's no way that I would have ever known that the people that I had married would be the people who I married. I was naive. I was very, insecure. I had a lot of self-loathing, and because I had been beat down emotionally a lot, and so I didn't have any real confidence. But at the same time, I knew that this was not the life. I had visions of what I would become, and who I wanted to become, and yet my life did not take that path. I ended up in a very different situation than I had ever dreamed for myself, and yet this was the life that I was living. So it has been a huge journey for me of massive amounts of failure and horrible mistakes, and also being a victim of different things, within the relationship that had transpired. And then, of course, with everything that's associated with someone who was put in prison and all of the judgment that's put on, the mother and different things. It was a lot of complex dynamics to have to navigate. And, associated rumors and people believing things that were completely untrue, and just all of that. It was a lot to hold. And I experienced a lot of abandonment and a lot, losing my best friends and family members not talking to me anymore. And even though these were things that were completely unrelated to me, I was still lumped into it for various reasons, which I can actually understand. I can understand different perspectives. I'm broad-minded that way. So to go from someone who was, the epitome of depression, and, seeing multiple therapists and being tried on all sorts of different medications because I was constantly told that I was the problem for everything, for the relationship issues, the marriage issues, the family issues. All the things were somehow pinned on me as I was responsible for it all. And so to go from that, to completely losing myself, and it happens slowly over time. I'm a very smart person. So it's not like, sometimes you ask those questions, or other people will even come at you with things like, that would never happen to me. I would never be treated that way. I would never put up with what you put up with. And it's like, yeah, you think, it's not like you willingly signed up for this and that's what you aspired, that I was going to have this, relationship. And yeah, I willingly signed up for that. It's a slow fade, and you don't even realize a lot of these things are happening. And so to go from that to becoming someone who truly understands my value, and that my value is actually, the word that I like to use is, it is not dependent upon anything external. My value is not external. It has zero things to do with how much money I have in the bank, the success that I've achieved in my career, my body, my size, my physical appearance. Literally zero things on the external have anything to do with my value. And that is something that was so foreign to me, because that was not how I perceived things in my world. And I think that's how a lot of us have been conditioned to believe, is that our value needs to come from other people seeing our worth, which always feels good. That does feel good. And of course, all those things feel good. It feels good to have the accomplishments. It feels good to have success in all these different areas. But when you are able to really tune into your own divine worth, it's just static. It's unshakable. That to me is such a position of empowerment. And it's like you get to this place where you feel almost invincible. And the reason why I've been able to get to that place is because of all of the challenges that I've navigated in my life. If I had not been, not that I would wish any of that on anybody else, but I am badass because I have navigated all of these things. Everything has been stripped away. I've had the car stripped away, the money stripped away, the status stripped away, the friends stripped away. Everything has been taken from me. You talk about living your worst fears. I've lived many of my worst fears, and I've come out on the other side stronger, more powerful, more confident, having more courage. So I am a living testament, I believe, of what can come from painful situations, from being a victim, from trauma and drama. I have been someone that has chosen. It is a choice. I have chosen to use all of those experiences and the things that have happened to me, not as something that I'm trying to run away from. A lot of people try to run away from their past. They want to hide their past. They keep the skeletons in the closet. And I'm someone that's doing the exact opposite. I'm a disruptor. I will take what you tell me can't happen, or you think that it can't be done, and I'm going to show you absolutely it can be done, but not because of me or who I am. It's because of what I'm tapped into. I'm very spiritually connected. connected. I wouldn't say I'm religious, but I'm very spiritually connected. And so I know what's possible. I know that when you have access to that, I call it a superpower. It's, having access to the divine and being able to really tap into that is a huge part of what has helped me be able to find courage and belief and trust and faith when there was no physical evidence to have courage or faith or belief. It really was a trust situation. So my path has been radically different than I feel like most people have been led down. And it's intentional. I've been able to see, looking back in retrospect, that all of that was almost intentional, because the story that I have now couldn't be told had I not been led down and guided down that path. So it has been very intentional. It hasn't happened by just wishing and hoping that things would be different. There was a lot of intentional work that I've done to create the transformation that you're seeing today. And I think that's kind of what you highlight in your podcast, is kind of like the journey of, you were at this place, now you're at this new place, and sort of how that has transpired. Because we can all have an inspiring story and be like, oh, yay, I made it, I'm on the other side of it. But there's a lot of women or other people in general out there that ask the questions, but how can I do that? So that's hopefully some of what I like to bring out.
Well, there's so many amazing things that you shared, and I won't be able to highlight all of it, but there are several that I do want to highlight. One is, we are not our circumstances. And I think over time, we believe that. Right? Humans in general start to believe that, okay, there has to be a reason why this is happening to me, instead of really looking at, what if we looked at these hard situations as an opportunity, right? And you mentioned that. And I love that, because there's so many women after divorce, regardless of what your circumstance is, and there's so many different circumstances around why a marriage ended or marriages ended. And we can make it about the other person. We can make it about the circumstance, but that is not going to move us forward. That is not going to help us to transform. The only way we can transform is for us to take a look in the mirror and say, what am I going to do next? How am I going to move forward? And I think that's why your story is so inspiring, because, man, all the things that you went through, talk about challenges, talk about trauma, and talk about unexpected changes, like that rug being, just taken out from underneath you. And you're like, whoa, where is the ground? Right. And so, but you used that as an opportunity. You used all of those moments as an opportunity to reflect and say, what can I learn from this? What can I learn? And then how can I show up the way I want to show up moving forward, without being dependent on, blaming someone else or shaming myself and sitting in that forever. You're like, nope, I'm going to move forward. And what I would love for you to share with the audience is, what sort of, I call them sort of the self-love, self-care journey around, how did you do that? Like, when people use the word all the time, right? The inner work. Well, you talked a lot about your spirituality, using that, all we have is sort of this present moment, but getting ourselves to quiet the noise, right, in our minds, to stop listening to that inner critic, and to really start to give ourselves what we need so that we can move forward. How can you tell the audience how you did that with all of the turmoil around you? How were you able to pull yourself back up?
That's a really powerful question. Thank you for sharing all of that, because that really is the thing. I think that there's a point where, I was a victim, and there's a point where you have a choice to make. And there's a lot of women who may get a little bit triggered by what I'm about to say, and that's okay. We're all on our journey, and I certainly get triggered all the time, and I've learned to understand what triggers are. They're actually for our benefit, and it has zero things to do with the person that triggers you. It's actually just reflecting a place inside you that's wanting to be healed. So I'm okay with saying what I'm about to say, but there comes a point where you learn, sometimes when you're in the victim mode, you feel like you're actually, there's a sense of empowerment in being a victim, because it's like everything's just being done to you. And it's kind of like, oh, poor me, these things are being done to me and I have no control over this. And so people are kind of, you can get a little bit stuck in that zone of everybody feeling kind of like having pity on you. And you have all these excuses that you can make, and people let you off the hook because, oh, poor her, she's going through those things. And I mean, I understand that. And I mean, I've certainly been in that position. But there was a point, and I don't know if this is just, I talked about being a disruptor and being someone who's a little bit of a rebel. I mean, if you see me, you can kind of tell that. And I've exceptionally embraced that in this season of my life, realizing that was actually part of my DNA. I was so toned down. I was so quiet. I was the little yes girl, the girl that wanted to make everybody happy and to live the life that everybody wanted her to have. And yet I was so stifled. There were parts of myself that just could not come out because there was so much oppression, and everybody saying, you can't do this, you can't wear that, you can't, all that stuff. If you do this, you're not going to look like a Christian. You're not going to sound like a Christian. You're not going to whatever. And it's like, you know what? It doesn't have to look this certain way. You don't have to fit inside that little box that everybody wants to keep you inside. In fact, doing that is actually a disservice, not only to you, but everybody outside you that could be impacted by you and your story if you actually were authentic to yourself. But I wanted to dial back and say that there's a point where I realized, I'm just sharing my story. You can try on what I say, and if it doesn't fit for you, that's okay. I'm not trying to tell anybody else what to do. I'm telling you what's worked for me. What worked for me was taking radical responsibility. When I talk about radical responsibility, I'm talking about all the things that could be said. I had no control over that. Well, sure, there's going to be things in your life that you have had no control over, or at least we feel like we didn't have any control over. And then when you really start to do the inner work, you start to see how you are creating the reality that you're living by a lot of the things that you are thinking, by who you were at the time. And it's all fine. That's the thing that I'm trying to say. It's all okay. I'm not saying abuse is okay. I'm not saying that those things are okay. What I'm saying is that I'm able to look at the life that I've lived, and I'm able to see how certain things have transpired because of my mindset, because of who I was at the time, my insecurities, my naiveties, my vulnerability, all of those things. And I look back at it not with any disdain or cynicism or bitterness anymore, because I understand the value of what I have experienced in my life and what I'm able to do with it. But taking radical responsibility to say, okay, if the life that I'm living doesn't feel good, I have complete control over that. And there's a lot of people who will disagree and say, oh, this circumstance, you have it easy because of this. I don't have this support. Whatever. You can use your reason. In fact, I did this one time. I had gotten to be almost 300 pounds and I was very miserable. It was very painful physically, emotionally, very painful. And I remember talking to a friend who had lost over 100 pounds and giving all my reasons why I couldn't. And they were legitimate. We can have legitimate reasons. And you can say, no, my physical circumstances are XYZ. I don't have the money. I don't have the time. I don't have the support. You can say all of those things. And at one point he came, he just said to me, he's like, Mindi, I'm going to be straight with you. And he said, every reason that you're giving me, I can show you someone who has the same exact reasons and they're doing it anyway. And it was the whole choose your hard thing. And it burned. That's the tough love situation. But I couldn't really argue with him because one of the best examples that I can think of is if you've ever heard of Nick Vujicic. I don't know how to say his name. I think it's Vujicic.
No, I haven't.
He literally, oh my gosh, you've got to look him up.
Okay.
He has no arms and no legs. He was born with no arms and no legs. And he is one of the most powerful, inspirational speakers that is in existence. He tried to commit suicide when he was 10 years old, trying to drown himself. And he couldn't drown. He was just floating. And he was so depressed because he's like, I can't even be successful at committing suicide because I can't even drown myself. And so it changed the trajectory of his life. And he has a gorgeous wife. I think he has 3 kids now. I mean, if anybody had an excuse, I feel like Nick had an excuse in every sense of the word. Physically, and he surfs, he swims, he does all kinds of things. So the radical responsibility and really taking an honest account, an honest audit, only you can do this. And anybody else that tries to do this for you, it's never going to work. You have to do this, and you have to have that really raw, honest conversation with yourself. And you have to say, at least what I did is I was like, you know what story do I want to be able to tell? I have a story that I'm writing a chapter in a book right now. And I'm like, I am so unqualified. I am so unqualified to talk to you about so many things. When people would stack me up against these people who have all the accolades and all the degrees and all of the, experience in different areas, I can't speak to. But what I can speak to is brokenness. I can speak to you about how to overcome some of the worst circumstances. I can talk to you about how to overcome financial hardship and being a single parent and raising my kids entirely by myself and not having child support and blah, 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 blah. I have all of that. And those are all tools that are in my tool belt to be able to show other people and speak from a position of authority and conviction because I've lived it. So I had to say, what story do I want to tell? Do I want to tell the story where it ends in being a victim and I was traumatized and all these things? Or do I want to be able to tell the story where I rose above and I created a beautiful, incredible life that wasn't just surviving, I was actually thriving? And where I had confidence, where I truly was able to love myself, not in a pious way or I'm better than anybody else way, but to truly understand my value, my worth, and what I have to provide, the reason why I'm here on this planet. I own that. And the only way that I've been able to do that is to be able to have those honest conversations and to be like, okay, I'm not where I want to be. I know I have an incredible amount of negative self-talk, constantly barraging myself of all of my failures and, you're hopeless, you're helpless, you're overweight, you're this, you're that, or whatever, all of that negativity. I was consumed by that. And not only that, it was coming from external people too. And you can filter that out to an extent. And that was a big part of what I had to do was I had to start shedding some of the relationships or letting things drop to the side that just wasn't creating that healthy environment. You have to be very mindful about who you're allowing into your space. So I did have to drop some of that, and that was hard. But I also had to be extremely intentional about my own personal development. And I know this is something that gets thrown around a lot. But that was the primary thing, is that I had to saturate. It's kind of like the equivalency of the problem. The solution has to be equally powerful. And for me, because my problem of negative self-talk and the view of myself and all of those things, which had created a lot of the physical circumstances that I was living because of my feelings of worthlessness and the things that I was then attracting into my life because of that, in order for me to change that, I had to radically immerse myself in the opposite. So I sometimes for hours and hours and hours a day, I would listen to podcasts like Lewis Howes' School of Greatness. I would listen to Maxed Out by Ed Milet. I would saturate myself with some sermons, which, I'm not trying to promote any particular person, but there were some talks. I see them more as talks than sermons that really activated me and really started to shift my perspective about the things that I had been through and about myself. Any legend that we read about, the people that we read about in our history books, they don't have, most of them, they don't have these stories of, like, oh, I graduated from an Ivy League school and I had this perfect GPA and my family was, incredibly supportive and all of that. Usually those people we read about in those books have a long list of mistakes and piles of failures and family trauma and all kinds of crazy stories. And that is actually the environment that created their greatness. That was the soil that their greatness was built out of. So how can I look back and begrudge my story or the things that I have lived because my greatness has been produced from that environment? So I have a very different perspective than most people about these things, just like what you were talking about, where I see my trials and tragedies and challenges that come up to me now as like, and I'm sorry if this offends some people, I'm in no way trying to excuse trauma or say that any of those things are okay. But my perspective now is like, all right, bring it, You want to throw something at me? Let's just see how that's going to work out. I'm going to use that. Whatever you throw at me, I'm going to use that as something that is I'm going to come out stronger, more powerful. I'm going to be more courageous. I'm going to use this. It's like alchemizing. I am someone that is here to transmute trauma. Okay. So you want to throw something at me. I'm going to turn that into something that is so powerful. It's going to be so good. Like there's nothing that you can bring into my world or into my life that isn't somehow going to be created and alchemized into something good. So I completely see all of that in a very different light. So someone who's going through a lot of words, I don't know what's allowed on this podcast. Someone who's going
You can say it.
Okay. If you're someone who's going through a lot of shit or has been through a lot of shit, like, you know what? I'm applauding you. I'm like, you know what? What that means is that you are powerful. You are a badass. You are someone that is here to do big things. You have a story. You are here to impact other people. And like, you are so badass that all of that is coming into your experience because you actually are worthy. You are someone who can handle it. You are someone who is able to withstand that. And if you feel like you're not that person right now, I'm getting so many chills talking about this. Because I definitely felt there were times where I was like, God, you drew the wrong name out of the hat for this one. This is way bigger than I can hold. But I promise you, if you are able to go one more day, one more hour, one more day, I looked back at myself and I was like, how did I even make it? I was suicidal. I didn't want to be able to, I had the days where I didn't know if I would even make it. I didn't want to make it another day. And so I understand that, but it's that person. It's that person who feels hopeless and helpless. If you can do one more day, that version of you will walk you to the version of who I am today. That version of me that felt hopeless, she was the one that her courageousness, even though she didn't feel like she was courageous, she showed up the next day, even if she had greasy hair and she was in her sweats and didn't want to open her curtains and didn't want to say anything to anybody. It was her showing up one more day. That one more day turned into weeks and months and years. And now my life is, a complete 180 from what I was experiencing back then. So I know I went over a lot of stuff in here. You probably
It's amazing. It's amazing. There's so much. Well, first of all, I want to say it doesn't have to look pretty. You just said that. Like it can look messy. And absolutely. I think that's okay because as women, especially, so many of us get stuck in this like idea that we have to walk around looking a certain way, doing things a certain way, whether that's as a mom, whether that's as a wife, whether that's as a partner, whether that's at add whatever you want in there, that it has to be this perfect view, and it does not. It can be messy. And I think what I want to highlight about your story that I think is important for people to know, and I talk about this with a lot of women that I work with, is it's about being comfortable in the discomfort. Like so many of us get stuck in this, even if it's, traumatic, even if it's difficult, it's comfortable because it's what we know. And so we don't push ourselves to be uncomfortable because we don't want to see it. We don't want to feel it. And so we look the other way and we go, nope, not today. Not today. I'm not there because just like you were talking about with your weight and that what your friend said to you, it's like, yeah, I could come up with every excuse on why I should stay in this toxic marriage or why I shouldn't push myself to pursue that opportunity. But if we're not uncomfortable, if we don't embrace that discomfort, we are not going to change. It is going to stay the same. And if that's what you want, and that's a lot of what I heard you say, Mindi, is we can stay there. You can stay in that victim mode, in that, comfort, whatever you want to call it. You can stay there, but you are not going to change. Your circumstances are not going to move. And again, that's okay if that's where you want to be. And it takes time. But I think the most important thing here is that it's work. It's not like, Mindi wakes up every day and she's like, oh, yeah, this is a wonderful day. I got everything under control. And it's just that way. Like, no, it's because you're willing to be like, nope, not today. You're going to throw that at me and I'm going to say no. And I'm going to make this hard move that feels really uncomfortable because I know that's going to move me. I know that's going to change it. And that's what's so inspiring about your story is that you're not okay anymore with the comfort. You're not okay with settling. You want more for your life. And with that takes a lot. It is. And so I think that's what people need to know is no, it's not easy for her. It is not easy for her. None of this was easy. Even showing up today on this podcast, being vulnerable and sharing your truth is not easy. It's fucking hard. Sorry, everybody out there, but it's hard. And so I think that's the message is that all of these things anyone can do. And, when you said you're not qualified, you are more than qualified. You were given these gifts. Other people they go and they pay for these degrees and they, pay for all these things. And I'm not minimizing that because that's hard work and that's their life goal and what they wanted to do. But we all were given these gifts and that makes us an expert. And those life moments are what make us an expert, right? So anyway, everything you said was so good, but I want to shift for a second because you're a mom. And a lot of my listeners are moms. A lot of them are single moms. And a lot of them sort of get lost in that I need to be a good mom. I need to make sure that, my kids are okay. And I think what's important that a lot of people lose sight of is that if we are taking care of ourselves, right? If we are modeling the behaviors that we want to see for our kids in the future, then we got to get up and we got to do hard things. And so I would love for you to share, part of your story is, wow. Not only did you have these situations where the rug got pulled out from under you, but you were homeless. Like you had to leave situations with the clothes on your back and start over again. And so I would love for you to tell me sort of as a single mom, how you were able to do that and still sort of create this sense of security for your children, this sense of tradition, this sense of family, when you're starting over with nothing. How did you get the strength to do that? And how do you continue to do that and model sort of those behaviors for your children?
That's been an interesting journey, and it's definitely had a lot of color to it. It's been very messy. I love how you brought up messiness because it is our imperfection that creates connection. So I'm all about messiness. Who wants perfect anyway? It's boring. So
yes.
I guess the first thing that comes to my mind is, we had to be out of our house. Like my second husband, when he was put in prison, we had to be out immediately. So there was no transition or I didn't have a chance to get another house. We were bouncing from friend to friend for 3 months until I was able to get us into our own place. And it was very messy. And because of the circumstances, it was extremely difficult. I didn't even know how to, my younger two kids, I think were 4 and 5 at the time. So I didn't even know how to try to explain to them what had happened in a way that they would be able to even conceptualize it. So my immediate thought was, I want to make this as non-traumatic as possible. And so I put it as an adventure. So I was like, we're on an adventure. And I tried to make it as fun as possible. Everybody was in therapy. We had weekly appointments with every kid had therapy appointments, including myself. I had 4 people in therapy, separate appointments. So I made a date. So I would make a date, therapy was a date time. So I would take each of my kids Even if it was for like a little McDonald's ice cream cone or something like that, we would make a date out of it. So they look to reframe their therapy appointments as like, oh, this is a fun time for us to spend together. And everywhere we were going, I was like, ooh, where are we going next? I wonder where we're going to be. And it was kind of like, I just wanted them to see everything as, this is a positive experience, even though, they had questions. They were like, where's dad? Because they didn't understand. They had no idea to even understand. He was there one day, gone the next, and it was like a death to them. And I did have to have that conversation with them. He's not coming back. It was the most heart-wrenching, conversation I've ever had to have, and with little kids, and you want them to be able to understand, but you can't explain it. So it was very, very, very hard. And we had to stay in the area for my daughter. Had one more year of high school left, and I was feeling this very strong calling to relocate my family from Texas to San Diego. And it made no logical sense, but it was clear as day. That's a whole separate story, but I was meant to be there. And my car had broke down, didn't even have my own car. And just the circumstances, it was one of those divine orchestration things where I was able to go to San Diego, relocate my 3 children to one of the most expensive places. It made no sense. People thought I was crazy. And I didn't have, a job lined up. We didn't have a home of our own. So it literally moving just some clothes and some toys and my 3 kids and I to a different state where I knew like one person, didn't have anybody, like supporting, rallying around us or anything like that. So it was insane. It was very rough ride. But I was also following that divine guidance, just knowing and trusting somehow it was going to work out. So it has looked very, very messy at times. It was flying by the seat of my pants, just really trusting. It's like taking the step before the path was even laid out. A very faith-building journey for me. And like I said before, my journey was actually intended to be that way so that I can speak from a position of experience and authority on this. But what I want to say is that a lot of mom guilt came with all of this. I was constantly paranoid about, the decisions that I was making, questioning if I was making the right decisions for my family. I had nobody to really kind of, I don't have a partner to ask, what do you think about this? Or, my therapist was honestly kind of like, well, what do you think I should do? It was almost like kind of having a friend to talk to more than therapy, because I didn't have another adult to bounce ideas off of. So there was a lot of questioning my decisions. And I remember just always thinking like, this choice that I'm making right now, is this going to be something that's going to impact my kids in a way that they're someday going to go to a therapist and talk about whatever is happening right now? So I was always kind of forward thinking, my kids in therapy, which actually became a joke. We still have this joke today. I'm just going to be like, add it to your therapy list, because we just kind of make jokes about it now, where I'm like, whatever's happening right now, just add that to your therapy list. So I have a very, very different view now, which is, I would say, non-traditional. It may even be a little, I'm sure there will be people that think that I am nuts and this is the wrong way to approach it or whatever, but I am who I am. And I feel like part of what I'm here for is to show people that there is a different way of navigating things. And I'm not saying like, I don't know how my kids are going to turn out. I may be thinking that I'm doing actually a pretty good job. And like, who knows? I don't know. Right. And I know that
none of us know.
Yeah, we tend to attach the decisions that our kids make or how they turn out or whatever. We have this kind of, I don't know if we want to say paranoia, but like a responsibility that we are supposed to be the ones responsible for how our kids turn out. And that's one of the things that I have really, really let go a lot. And it has made a dramatic difference in the relationship that I have with my kids. The relationship and how I parent with my kids is very different. It's light years different from what I was taught. And I've really learned that us moms, we are way too unselfish. I have had to learn that it's actually extremely healthy to be what people would call selfish. And as a single mom, people are actually harder on single moms I feel like, than married moms, because they hold you to a much stricter criteria. I've had more judgment as a single mom than I ever had when I was a married mom. It's like people are looking at you with
Yes.
that critical eye, like, oh, her kids, they're like that because she's a single mom, or they're always blaming it to being a single mom. Whatever issue is happening is like, no, it's because she's a single mom. It's so irritating. And we have a lot more scrutiny as a single mom. So because of that, I was also scrutinizing myself and like trying to make sure that I was doing everything. And I was trying to make sure that I was hypersensitive to, my kids going to school, and like they better look at their best. And I better try and be able to make sure my kids are wearing things like the other kids are, because I don't want them to think that because they're being raised by a single mom that, they can't fit in the same way that kids with two parents can show. It was stupid. In retrospect, it was like, why was I doing that? I mean, I understand why I was doing that, but it was
we all do it.
and we all do it. But I'm just saying, exceptionally, I have a heart for the single moms, because it's like, let yourself off the hook, give yourself some grace, some kindness. I have nobody helping me. Like I didn't have a co-parent. I didn't have any child support. I was definitely the one that was selling plasma to be able to get groceries and Christmas gifts. And my kids were the kids that were on the angel tree, because everybody's like, oh, Mindy's got 3 kids and let's put her kids on the angel tree for Christmas because she can't afford to give her kids. I was definitely that person. And it was so humiliating. I felt so much shame about it all. And I just have such a different perspective now. So now, we're so used to, you need to prioritize your kids above yourself. You need to make sure that the kids need to come ahead of yourself. And I understand that. And I'm definitely not shaming. Like if there's one message I would say to people is I'm not shaming anybody. Everybody has their own journey. I feel like it's all, whatever you're doing, whatever you want for your life, do your thing. I'm just telling you what I have extracted from my own experience. And so a theme that I live by is, when you are doing what's best for you, it automatically becomes the best thing for everybody else. And that's really hard to accept, because especially if you're an empath like me and you have a heart for helping and serving, and you want to be the good Christian or whatever, however you define that, you say yes to a lot of things. You take on a lot of obligations, whether it's your kids or something else. You're always feeling, and there's almost like, sometimes it's a little bit of like you're giving a pat on the back, because like, ooh, look how nice I am, or look how good. You might not actually say that in actual words, but I realize like there's a little bit of almost like ego involved in that, because it's like you're this person that's so self-sacrificing and you're always giving for other people to a detriment, and people are like, oh, you're so giving all the time and you're so always helping people and you're so whatever, and it's like to a fault. And it's not doing you good. It's actually not doing your kids good. I remember one of my kids one time came home from school and she was like, Mom, the other kids, their moms are doing these other things for them or whatever. And I'm having to make, I made my own lunch or something like that. And I was like, you know what? First of all, I don't subscribe to doing what everybody else is doing. I actually am very big about doing our own thing. And I said, so I'm never going to be held to whatever standard someone else is living by. And I said, second of all, I am intentionally teaching you guys to be independent, because I think a lot of parents actually rob their kids of learning how to be strong individuals, be independent, know how to do things. And I said, I'm teaching you how to cook. I'm teaching you how to do I'm no great cook, but I'm going to teach you how to make some mac and cheese and spaghetti. I'm going to teach you how to make your own peanut butter and jelly sandwich. And, it's like you are.
So you can be independent.
I mean, if it ever came to that, and I'm not doing it from a lens of like, oh boy, you better set yourself up. But I just think it's really good and healthy. And I think a lot of parents are actually crippling their kids by not having them experience kind of like life. So I want my kids to learn things in an environment where they're supportive. I'm not trying to, a lot of us, we don't want our kids to make mistakes. We want to save them for all the things that we did. And we want them to have a better life than what we had for ourselves or whatever. And what I realized when I was doing that, in fact, I had this spiritual message came in just recently where I felt very clear, like as if a voice came down from heaven telling me, you trying to lessen the ripples in your children's lives is actually detrimental to them. You need to let them ride out the waves. You need to not try and make life as good and soft of an experience as possible. You need to actually let them make the mistakes, let them see the consequences of their own choices and their own actions. And I'm not saying, I mean, obviously, like you could take this to an extreme, but I mean, now I kind of have experimented. My kids will tell me, we're nocturnal. We're nocturnal, mom. We don't have the same type of sleep schedule that you have, right? And so I used to have a lot of, no, this is how it is. Kids have a bedtime. You need to, there's all these rules. We have all these rules that society has conditioned us to believe. And I just don't subscribe to a lot of those anymore. Or even if, let's say that is the case. Let's say that there's a bedtime and there's all these science that has been backed. If you get so many sleeps before, I'm giving an example here, that people could say and criticize that I do things differently. And it's so interesting when I've allowed my kids to be like, okay, let's see how that works. Because I'm challenging my own beliefs, and I'm saying, okay, let's see, let's try it out. Not because I'm trying to prove anything, but like, okay, maybe I need to expand my own mind in this area. And it's so interesting to see how sometimes they're actually very right, and they're way more productive in their own zone, because my kids are homeschooled. So they can be way more productive in their own way, in their own time, in their own schedule, and how they want to do things, and they still get things done. And I don't have to hound them about it, and I don't have to try and micromanage them about it if I allow some leeway. And then there have been other times where I've tried to enforce things, and when I backed off and I was like, you know what, I'm going to show up to you with just nothing but love. And I'm going to be accepting of you, and I'm going to just kind of expand my own mind. And I'm going to say, okay, Mindi, you chill, you live your life, you be happy, you do things that you enjoy, you do your have your girl time, do your dates, do your whatever you want to do. And me having that energy impacts them. And then they're actually doing the things that I wanted them to do without me saying it, because I'm showing up differently. And now they're actually realizing, there might be something to what my mom said. And, I don't want to do it when she's telling me to do it. But now that she's not telling me to do it anymore, I actually might want to do it. So my parenting style is so different. Most people would look at how I parent my kids, and I'm sure the experts would flaw all sorts of things that I'm doing. But I feel like I have a great relationship with my kids, and yeah, I'm a lot more liberal than what I was raised. But we have very open conversations. Nothing is off the table. But I'm also someone that understands that my kids have their own journey. They have their own path that they need to walk. And there's a certain level of responsibility that I would take for safety and, making sure they have a roof over their heads and food in their bellies and things like that. And there's an extent that's like, you know what? There's only so much responsibility that we are actually responsible for, and they need to learn their own lessons and have their own life experience. And yes, some of that is going to happen while they're under your roof. And sometimes you need to kind of like dial it back, like not be so parenting. Like not be so parenting.
Yes. Oh my goodness.
It depends. It depends on your age. My kids are, my youngest is 14. My son's almost 16. My oldest daughter's 25. And so I realized that there are some key differences also just in ages, between girls, boys. Like there can be some interesting dynamics. So again, this is my own experience, and everybody's having their own. So, if you don't like what I have to say, it's totally fine. Throw it out the window.
No, oh my goodness. Well, I love so much of what you said, because I think we don't give ourselves, especially single moms, don't give ourselves permission to have our own life outside of our kids.
And you feel selfish for it. And it's
and you feel so selfish for it. And it's like, well, wait a second. So you want your kids to think that your life is only about them. And what are you teaching them when they become fathers or mothers or whatever their journey is, that they can't live out their dreams, that they can't shine their light? Like, why? That to me it makes no sense. And so, but it took me a long time to learn. I mean, when I became a mom, I thought, okay, wait a minute. Okay, God gave me this gift. I need to do it right. I need to make sure I don't mess this up. And it's like, well, wait a second. The gift what I need to give them is, like you just said, shelter, food, safety, and love. That's what I need to give them. It's, I grew up in a household where it was, you know what you should do? You know what you should do? Literally every time, you know what you should do? And that's how I defined myself was, okay, I think I'm supposed to do this. It's like, I don't want my kids living that way. And so, I think someone gave me this guidance where they said, if you could just parent from a place of curiosity instead of a place of control, like, be curious, like what's going on, how when you are trying to control as a parent, that's when your kids start to pull away. That's when the secrets start to come. That's when, I think the way that you are doing things now with your kids, where you are giving them that freedom to say, you know what? Okay, you're going to go to bed later. Okay, whatever the consequence is for that, you're going to feel it, right? I'm not going to feel it. So it's like, go for it. See what happens. Test the waters, because how else are they going to learn? And so I love that. I think there's so many good things in what you shared there, because so many women do define themselves as that mother. And what does that look like? And it's this whole costume we put on, and we don't allow our authenticity and who we really are to shine through, because we're so stuck in what others think about us as a mother and how we show up. So I feel like I could talk to you forever, Mindi. Like, there's so many things. I'm going to have you back, because I could go on and on all day and talk about inspiration. Your story is so inspirational. Your courage, your strength, your badassery shines through in everything that you say and do. And so it's been a pleasure meeting you, talking to you. And so I do want to just highlight, because I always like to at the end, just more about what you're doing. I know you're doing a lot of speaking, which I think is great. Keep sharing your voice. But if people want to find you, they want to know more about you, they want to connect with you, how can they do that?
Well, thank you for asking that. I'm not here to promote anything specific, but if you feel like what I've said resonates and you want to connect with me, I'm on all the social medias. You can find me on Instagram, the Fenyx, Fenyx. I'm on Facebook. My name, Mindi Lyons, or the Mindi Show. You can find me that way. There will probably be some links, I would guess, in the podcast notes. I don't know. We'll find out. But
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, I have YouTube. I have my own podcast. I'm just not very active on those platforms. And more will be coming. My website is being redone right now, so that will be popping up with the Fenyx, Fenyx. So you'll be able to find me some way, somehow, and I would love to welcome you into my world if it feels aligned to you. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, thank you. And thank you for sharing your authentic voice and just being you. I think you are going to make so many women just feel empowered and make some real changes. So thank you so much for that and for sharing your voice. And for those of you that are listening, just as a reminder, if you're interested in joining the From Mrs. to Me community, you can find us on Facebook at From Mrs. to Me, Rediscovering You After Divorce, where you can also join our divorce renewal and rediscovery circle. And as I always say, remember that you can't pour from an empty cup. So do the inner work. And I can't wait for our next guest and our next episode. And thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed another episode of From Mrs. to Me, real life stories of real women and their journey of transformation after divorce. I'm Crissy Freeman, and if you like this episode, please drop a review in Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Do you have a story to share? Are you ready to inspire other women on their journey through divorce? If so, find me on Instagram at From Mrs. to Me. For more tools and resources on creating your path to transformation after divorce, follow my community on Facebook, From Mrs. to Me, Rediscovering You After Divorce.